So we'll be starting in another couple of minutes. Before we get started, I hope everybody had a good start of the conference today, and you have enjoyed the musical fusion as well. So a very good morning to all of you once again. And before we start, I'll just brief you with the agenda today. Okay, so you all know that the upcoming session which we are starting with is going to be Allyship in Agile by Rucha Kapare. After that, we have a workshop on OKR Gamified by Rahul Ainchwar and Anand Vardhan. So initial plan was to have it for 90 minutes, but as you know, during the common session, it was announced that Frederick Billstrom, who has shown that interest that he wants to take a session on performance management. So we have accommodated that after the 1 hour of workshop OKR Gamified, and it's going to be 30 minutes. So that is the change in the today's schedule, and time and again I'll just repeat it so that everybody is aware of it. Okay, and all right, so in the interest of time, let's get started. So today we are going to have this session on Allyship in Agile. Are we really diverse and inclusive? The session is being delivered by Rucha Ramchandra Kapare. So a brief introduction about Rucha. Rucha heads the Global Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Data team. She is passionate about DEI in the research world and in general. Working on something new every day keeps her motivated. So yeah, thank you, Rucha, for being here, and over to you.
Can we start this? Okay. Thank you so much, Pranita, and a very good morning to all of you. I think this is the best time of the day to have a session, and I'm hoping with all the caffeine kick that you've had, let's move on to quickly solving a riddle before I talk about this topic, which is allyship in Agile. So if we can move on to the next slide, I will quickly explain it. There are some activity sheets at your table. Grab a sheet for yourself first. Don't go through it yet. I will quickly explain what you need to do.
In case there are not sufficient sheets, we have it. Just let us
know.
Just
a show of hands if you don't have the sheet, and we'll pass it around. Okay, let me explain the riddle to you. If you have the answer, give it a few seconds. Don't call it out yet. So, a father and a son are in a terrible accident. Okay. Unfortunately, the father is killed on the spot, and the son is then rushed to the hospital. When the surgeon enters the operation theater, the surgeon says, "I can't operate this person, he is my son." How is that even possible? Give it a few seconds. Grab a pen if you can and write the answer. And then I will invite a few of you to share your responses. Okay. Does anyone want to share? Yes, please. Okay. Okay. Any more responses? Yes? Okay. Okay, so that's the same thing as you mentioned. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so just very quickly, the surgeon here is the mother, as you rightly called it out. How many of you could not think of it? When I did this activity for the first time, I could not think of it. The mother is the surgeon here, right? So mother is the surgeon here. Let's look at another example, okay? Just close your eyes for a few seconds and picture a nurse. What are the things that come to your mind? Can you describe? A lady, okay. What else? Any further adjectives? Okay. What else? Okay. Okay. Cool. So we've pictured the nurse as a woman, right? Which is not necessarily always the case. Now, people who have just come in, please grab your activity sheets. Yes. Now, picture a scientist. Just quickly think of the things that come to your mind. Yes, what did you mention? Okay. Okay. Okay, definitely male. Okay. Cool. So basically, these activities were to tell you that biases exist, right? And we all are human. And it's absolutely fine to have these biases. What is important is to acknowledge those. If I say I do not have any biases, I think that would be a bigger of a problem because all these biases are very ingrained and inbuilt. If you say there's no bias, probably our brain is not functioning properly, and that's a bigger problem, right? So far we have established that these biases exist, and there was a research in around the beginning of the 19th century when children were asked to draw a scientist. It was typically a white man with a long coat. And now things have changed a bit. A few children have started drawing. When the research was conducted again this year, a few children have started actually picturing someone who is not a white person or a white man, which I think is a very big and a positive change. So moving on, this is essentially to establish that these biases exist and they impact our personal life, not just our personal lives, they also impact our professional lives. So if we move on, are there any examples around you where these biases might exist in your professional life specifically? Yes.
For example, good handwriting. For example, if a female employee is writing something, so it's mostly sometimes understood, or like she must be having a good handwriting.
Okay,
It
okay.
can be other way around as well, or maybe if there is a chart paper, someone has drawn something very good. The first thing sometimes comes like okay, आपने ही बनाया होगा.
Okay.
Might
Thank,
be you will be.
thank you for sharing. That's a good example.
A very generic one, and I was actually shocked.
Hello, I'm audible, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so pretty generic one, and I myself faced this. So one of my colleague, he was talking about his cook, that how well the cook prepares the meal, and I really appreciated also when I had the tiffin that he brought. And later, after a week or so, I found out that the cook was a male.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. I know we can take one more and then we can come back. Can I request her to share, please?
So very common in workplaces are availability biases, which people don't know. So if you are seen online all the time, people think you're productive and you're an efficient worker. That is not true. Other is gender biases, which people address. One is age biases, where based on your age, you think you're capable to do certain role. And other, there is halo effect biasness, where one aspect stands out when you rest and you're being judged based on that aspect.
Wonderful. All amazing examples and all relevant to us. Thank you so much for sharing. So basically, as humans, we always look at these biases in a way like if you have really happy customers, but your attention might be taken by that one negative review. That's like a negativity bias. Or if you have your own theory, your attention might go to the data that confirms that theory. So that's also a confirmation bias. And these are all tricks our brains use usually to do things quickly, but you also need to look at the downside of it as to how, what is it that you can better achieve by acknowledging or by being aware of these biases. So if we move on to the next slide, what is the impact of these biases on an individual when you look at them on a personal side or a professional side? So usually, how do you feel if you're being tolerated somewhere? Like someone says like, gives you a feeling that you're being tolerated, not necessarily someone likes being around you or someone likes you being on the team. So that's usually the limiting zone of an individual, and my apologies, this is a bit faint. But if it goes to the extreme end where someone is being abused or harassed, that is definitely a very, very damaging zone for them. These individuals can't function properly. Versus now if you look at how can you take an individual into a high performing zone, it is when you respect them, when you make them feel included, you make them feel that there's a sense of belonging. And more organizations are acknowledging this. If an individual is happy, they're high performing, it's good for them, it's good for the business, and it's definitely a win-win. And what are organizations doing about it is they're intentionally aligning DEI into their strategies. What DEI is, let's park that and I'll come to it very, very briefly. But then how is it helping the organizations? And if we move on to the next slide, there's some research done. I'm happy to share the sources. But it is believed that organizations which are more inclusive and which are more diverse are 8 times more likely to achieve the business outcomes, 6 times more likely to be innovative and agile, and even high performing, and 2 times more likely to be achieving their financial targets. And a very simple example that I can give is, and this is, when I say inclusive teams, it is both end, like employees as well as the customers that you talk about. A very nice example here is PWD, like people with disabilities account to 1.3 billion of the world's population, right? If you build products for them, not just for them, like with them, and if you have some perspectives on your team, it definitely helps. Like if you're building a product for someone, you need to take into account what they think or feel. And if you have such diverse teams, so 1.3 billion, you're definitely going to capture their sentiments, they're going to become your customers. On top of that, their family members, their friends, definitely are going to be attached to the same sentiment. So that accounts to 3.5 billion more people. Together, this is more than half the world's population. So you can imagine how big of a segment this is. And to top it up, senior citizens, people who are approaching an age, are likely to have one or more disability. And believe me, they usually have a huge income to dispose, right? If you don't leverage on this segment, then you're throwing away millions of dollars of rupees. So of course, there's a business case for it, right? Which is what I just explained to you. In some countries, there's a legal case as well. Like you have to abide with having certain percentage of people from certain areas. But more importantly, there's a social case for it. We should do it because it is the right thing to do, right? So moving on, we spoke about what biases are, how do they impact us as an individual, and what are the things an organization can do. And then we saw how it helps the organization as well as the individuals, of course. But how do you actually work on this? How do you make this happen? You can make this happen by providing equitable opportunities for people who come from different backgrounds and make them feel included, right? Which is exactly where diversity, equity, and inclusion come into picture. I'm going to ask the audience now, do we understand what these 3 terms are? Diversity, anyone? Yes? Okay, okay. What else?
Where you come from, your beliefs, your economic scale, all those kind of things.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Whenever the conversation of DEI comes up, gender definitely is an aspect, a very important aspect, but we need to understand DEI is not just limited to gender. There's so many different aspects, and I think Priya made a lovely point in the morning, where she mentioned people from all age groups, or including all your employees, in making them feeling belonged to that place, making them feel included in the different decisions that are made. So it could be diversity of thought, it could be diversity of the different age groups that you have in your teams, it could be diversity of the culture, the language, the country that you come from, or different career stages you are from. So diversity is all the things that are different in us, which also make us unique, that we bring to the table. And I think that's the best part. None of us can be alike, and that's the beauty. So that's diversity. Inclusion, anyone? Okay, I'll answer this. So inclusion is basically with all the differences that we bring, how is it that you can create an experience where everyone feels included? As simple as that. And equity is basically giving, mind you, there's a difference between equality and equity. Equity is being fair and giving just enough so that everyone has the same leveling field. There's a very beautiful picture around this. If time permits, I'll definitely show you that. But everyone clear up to this point? DEI. So what we've looked at is biases. How do they impact individuals? How do they impact the organizations? What are they doing? How are they benefiting? And how is it that you achieve these, how is it that you can work towards this? Now, moving on, the workspaces that we work in, we looked at DEI, but how is it connected to Agile? That's mostly the way of working that we have. So very quickly, Agile, like really loosely translated, allows teams to leverage their unique skills and deliver maximum value to customers in a fast and adaptive manner. Everyone agrees to this? Okay. DEI, we just looked at it, it encompasses creating a welcoming and supportive environment for all. Mind you, it's not just employees. It's employees and your customers with the PWD example that I gave you. And these two concepts really go hand in hand. How? I think the first value that Agile quotes is individuals and interactions over processes and tool implies that for Agile to work, DI must be a core component. It has to be the heart of everything that we do. Right? So here we have established the connection between the two. Now moving on. Whose responsibility it is? We've seen DI is important. Whose responsibility it is? I think I should stop the presentation here. I have a really good audience who already understands it. But basically, what people think is DI is the responsibility of, say, the CEO, or there is a leadership team, or there's a head of a department, or a department which is going to look at it. It is never the individual's responsibility. There are so many things we can do at our individual levels and bring change bottom up. And what you can do is start by being an ally. Okay? You might have heard this term very, very often in the last few years with respect to the LGBTQ community, but that's not the only definition of allyship. You can literally be an ally to anyone, but let's look at what the bookish definition says. And again, these were the top searches on Google. Again, it could be a bias because people have looked at it, but I will also explain it with an example. So allyship is when a person from a privileged group works for the rights of a marginalized group without being a member of it. This is one definition. The other is it is an active and consistent and artist practice of learning and unlearning. Focus on this word, learning and unlearning, reevaluating in which a person holding systematic power seeks to end oppression with a group of people who are systematically disempowered. Very complex, very big. Let me explain it to you in simple terms. So I've been privileged to have education, which is of the best quality since my childhood. My parents were really liberal to educate me, to send me a convent school. I can speak decently good English. I think I consider that as my privilege, right? Now, imagine I walk into a boardroom where I might be the only person looking like myself, right? Sometimes it might be the case that I'm the only woman there, or maybe I'm the only young person in that room, as I've been told. So my privilege has shifted, right? In this situation or in this context, automatically I'm the less privileged person here. And what we need to be mindful of is these privileges are very, very fluid. They can change based on the instances, they can change based on what phases you are in life. And allyship is necessarily when you are in a position of a privilege, you supporting someone who is less privileged than you at that point. But more importantly, when you are in a position of less privilege, you also need to find your own allies. And both the things should go hand in hand, and both the things are really very important. So it's basically the privileges that you have, and you're always going to be more privileged than someone and less privileged than someone. Find an ally and be an ally for someone. I would like to quote one more example here. I was reading this book by Sonali Anand. She's a very well-known person in the field of DEI. And in her 80s, she traveled to the US for her education. And she mentioned that she was brought in a very high-class family in Mumbai, where everyone at her home spoke English. She had never seen, and she also belonged to a very good caste according to the Indian caste system. So she already had that privilege of everything she could have in her life. And the moment she landed in Heathrow for her flight to the US, and she entered the restroom. She saw all women who just looked like her cleaning these washrooms wearing salwar kameez. And immediately her entire world turned upside down. From being a person of privilege to being in the US as a minority, there was a complete shift of privilege. And that's what made her aware. Had she been in India, so you don't become a bad person if you have these biases or if you've had a very good life. All that you need to know is when the counter changes, you should be able to acknowledge what it could be like other times when someone is less privileged, right? So what exactly can we do as allies? The very first thing is acknowledge that a bias exists in yourself as an individual. Okay? That's the most important thing to do. And I would like to talk about this with a very, very nice quote is the very first thing to make a change is first acknowledge that a problem exists and that problem might be in you. Again, I'm saying it's a problem. It's a very natural thing. Acknowledging is again very important. And I would love to quote something by the Dalai Lama here, is to be aware of a single shortcoming in oneself is way more better, far more better than looking at 1,000 shortcomings in someone else. And this really beautifully quotes what I'm trying to say here. So this is the first point. Acknowledge that a bias exists. What are the other things you can do? So moving on, reflect on your ways of working. Okay? As an individual, as a team, bring change inside out. And the kind of things you can do is discuss some findings with your team. I will tell you what are the things you can do immediately starting Monday. But discuss findings with your team, bring change inside out. Focus on one diversity area. And one example I can give you is look at the strong and the quiet voices in the room. That's one area that you could begin with, right? Sometimes it could happen you have a new joinee in your team who is fresh out of college, is not from a city like Pune, might not be very well versed in English, might also not be very confident because they come from a small town or a village. How is it that you're enabling them? But they might have the most awesome ideas, right? Are you creating that space for them? So these are the kind of areas in which you can focus as a team. As a leader, and mind you, I'm not talking about a manager here, and I believe all of us are leaders. As a leader, listen very, very carefully for verbal and both non-verbal cues. It's very important. And then create opportunities for those strong and quiet voices in the room. So when I facilitate workshops, what I do for this is usually I keep it a mix, right? Sometimes I would throw a question and ask people to answer it directly, but that sometimes also leads other people to be influenced. Sometimes I just ask them to reflect in silence, write down their thoughts on a post-it, and then someone would call it out and they can elaborate on it. So try to keep it a mix of things so that both the strong and quiet voices get an opportunity. And most importantly, be an ally to someone, and equally important, find one for yourself. Moving on. So just a very, very quick summary. Biases, impact, value to individuals, value to the business. What is it that we can do through DEI is becoming an ally. And there was a huge list of the things that I told you you could do. But what are the things you can do immediately on Monday when you are in office? So take a piece of paper. You don't have to mention anything to anyone. Just put a cross or a tick when someone is talking over the other person in a meeting. Really very simple things, but really very impactful. Observe this for a week. Share your findings with the team at the end of the week. You don't have to tell them that whether they need to change or not. Tell them this is what you've observed. Ask them, do you think this needs to change? If they feel yes, try to implement something really very fun. You could have like a pizza wheel or an ice cream wheel, where we used to have this in one of our Scrum teams, where our Scrum Master had a pizza wheel if we were late, and this was just a fun way of agreeing to the time that we had committed to. Then we just used to put the person's name, and at the end of the month, we just treated ourselves with it. So you could have a cookie jar or an ice cream wheel or things like these. So people talking over one another. Second is look for people who are not very comfortable in sharing their ideas in front of a big group. And the third is use of inclusive language. You can use really very simple things like instead of using the word guys, you could use words like folks, which is like a little more inclusive. Or you could be a little considerate, ask people what is it, how is it that they would be referred, they would be like to referred, what their pronoun is. If you want to know more details about this, I'm happy to talk about it. But basically try and use inclusive language. A scrum master or a project manager is not always a he. A scientist is not always a he. A nurse is not always a she. So these are the kind of things you need to look at inclusive language. And whatever I said here is about showing people some data, right? People are not ill-intended. They don't do it with bad intentions. It's just that they're not aware of it sometimes. And that's what this says is there's only one way to look at things until you realize and until someone makes you show how is it that you can look at it with different eyes. And the people talking over one another is a very, very good example of that, right? So I would like to do a very quick activity with you. There's a paper sheet that you have in front of you. If you just flip it, and I can guarantee you there are going to be some really aha moments for you after this activity. It's really very simple, should take 2 to 3 minutes. I'm not going to ask you to share your sheets. It's not to assess you. You can keep it to yourself. But basically, everyone has the sheets? Okay, I will quickly guide you through the activity. So think of 6 people who you would go to for making your decisions, either in personal or professional lives, or who you trust with your opinions or decisions. It could be people in your personal and professional life, right? Take a moment, take a minute, I would say, and write down the name of 6 people on the extreme left of the sheet, which is the name or the initials column. The sheet is going to stay with you, so you don't have to worry. Then you would write the name of the friend. So the question that I've been asked is, does it have to be a specific individual? Yes. If you go to your friends for opinion, then you might write your friend's name, whatever it is. But individuals is it, essentially. A quick show of hands if you have the 6 names already. Okay, let's give it a few more seconds. Try and have at least 4 names, if not 6, okay? Just for the purpose of this activity. Okay, let me guide you with the first one. So for the first individual, whoever they are, compare it with yourself. If the gender of this individual is different, only if it is different to your gender, then you put a cross, else you leave it as is. So for example, if I take my mother's example here, her gender is same as mine, I will leave it blank. Her profession definitely is different to mine, so I'll put a cross here. Okay? Her age is different to mine. Note age need not be precise. You can take like a leeway of 5 plus minus 5 years. Marital status again is same, so blank. Her educational qualifications are very different to mine, so I would again put a cross. And then disability or differently, for people who are differently abled, this could be a visible or an invisible disability. If you know about it, and if you know it is different, put a cross, else it will remain as is. Clear? Any questions? Take a minute and do this for all the other people on your list. Okay. Now, if you're done, just count the number of crosses, or count the number of differences, rather. A quick show of hands if you're done. Okay, we have a couple of hands going up. Let's wait for a few seconds. I don't want to influence people by what my answer was. Okay, so first of all, there's no right or wrong answer to this. When I did this activity for the first time, my count of differences was so terribly low that it made me realize that I go to people to either get decisions or get opinions on something which I've already decided. And I just go to them to satisfy my ego, to confirm what I've done, right? Is this right or wrong? It depends. I wouldn't say. But if I want to grow as an individual, if I want to get out of that bubble of mine, I definitely need to have different opinions and perspectives in my life. Do you have to change anything if your crosses are less? Probably not. It's up to you. But it is just an eye-opening exercise to see, what your circle is all about. Does anyone of you want to share your experience? Like, you don't have to give the number, but any insights from the activity that you did? Yes? Okay.
I don't know, but I hardly probably except quite and task anything to anyone. So, or rather it would be different at different times. Where I will try to understand who can be the expert in certain.
Okay. Okay. And for this, for the few names that you have, was it like very similar to the people, to your personality, or was it a bit different?
No, probably everyone is different.
Okay, that's really good. Any other insights anyone has? Yes, please.
So I realized that in my at least trusted six, I'm reaching out to people with different professions.
Okay.
And I have almost 3 crosses in every column.
Okay.
So tells me and makes me realize that I'm reaching out to people with different gender, profession, age, marital status, everything, which makes me feel good for now at least.
Thank you. That's really helpful. So what I want to quote here, all of us are on a journey, right? Because I'm standing here and talking to you doesn't mean I'm all known about this topic. Even I am on a journey. And when I looked at my sheet, it was very different. But I'm more aware. And that's the most important thing to remember here. We can take a few more inputs from people, but in the interest of time, I will now move on to a few quick takeaways. One is understand your own privilege, very important. I think that has been the essence of what we just discussed. Acknowledge that a gap exists. It is only human. Lead by example. You need to walk the talk and not just talk the talk. It need not just be a strategy. I think this is applicable to everyone, including us, the exec board, and every individual who is there in the organization. And I think it also takes courage to be an ally, to question these things if there's just talking the talk happening in your organization. There needs to be some action, right? Being intentional is the key. Once you've acknowledged that there's a problem, you can't just let things be. Right? You have to be intentional in your efforts. We've come a long way, but it also needs a lot of effort, a lot of conscious effort that we need to take in this area. And last but not the least, in a world where you can be anything, be an ally. Moving on, with that, I would quickly want to thank my allies. First is my parents. If I can be half as good as them, I will consider my life well lived. It's been 5 years. I've been speaking at conferences, and today I feel incredibly proud to have them listen to my talk for the very first time. They're here with me today. It's a feeling I cannot express. It's a very, very proud moment for me. And moving on, second is my brother. He has inculcated that curiosity in me in everything that I do since my childhood. Second is a very good friend of mine, Ankit. I can bank on him for anything and everything. I can discuss things with him under the sun without being judged. He's a very good partner to have. He's also my husband. He's here as well. And the third is Vishal. Vishal, I think, has given a direction to my career. He has been an incredible mentor to me, an incredible coach, and I think where I am, I owe it to the three of them. And professionally, I owe it a lot to Vishal as well. So that's about it. Just very quickly, on the next one, diversity is a fact, okay? You can't change it. All of us have these differences. What is important is inclusion is a choice, and we need to make that choice actively every day at every moment. With that, I end my talk, and we've come a long way. There's still a long way to go. And how do you bring a change is taking one small step at a time. That's it from me. I'm happy to take questions. I think we have a minute, right? Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Yes, please.
Can you please talk finding the ally or being ally behind the point there on the slide? Finding the ally. So, can there be any thoughts from your side on it?
I think it's a very good question. Around the people you have, so there are a lot of people you can approach, right? Asking if they can help you. A lot of times people are also hesitant because they might not know if you would like it or not, if they come and deliberately ask if you need any help. So the first step is something that you need to take. If you see someone is really good at an area, or if you see someone as a person who can help you or support you, going and actively approaching them is very important. And it need not be just for your teams. There's so many people out there, and I think another topic that Priya brought out was empathy, right? A lot of people have that. A lot of people are compassionate, they want to help. So you should definitely make that as your first move. And I'm happy to talk about it more in the break if you want to. Yeah. Any further questions? Okay. Yes.
So in that sheet, okay, take this mic.
Yes.
Yeah, hello. Hello. I don't think I'm audible. Okay, no worries. So in that sheet, let us say I get with lesser number of crosses. Okay. And I'm comfortable with that. Is that okay or?
It's absolutely okay. It's a choice. See, the thing is you don't necessarily have to take an action. Okay. What is important is you're aware. You're consciously making that choice again. Correct. Right? Right. And if you want to do something, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but at any given point of time, see, whatever has brought you here is not necessarily will take you elsewhere. So if you want to change something, you might as well think about if that's the thing that you want to change. Yeah? Thanks. Cool. I think that's it from me. Thank you so much. You've been a lovely audience, and I would be happy to have any further discussions with you during the breaks. Yeah?
Thank you, Rucha, for a wonderful session. And I think, a lot of things people already know, but it takes, that specific time when we are really thinking about it. And that is what happened after this session, that, we really had to think about, what are our intentions and are we really doing something intentionally or unintentionally. So thank you so much, Rucha, for the wonderful session. And as, we already know that it's a proud moment for Rucha having her parents over here, and what we can do more for her is getting felicitated by own parents in this conference. So I would request Mr. and Mrs. Ramchandra Kapare, please come on stage and felicitate Ms. Rucha. And you see the Slido boards on the screen. Please give feedback on this session. That would really be appreciated. Have a big round of applause, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, uncle. Thank you, auntie.